Today I'm going to be doing something a little different, a dish that was popular all the way from the mid-18th century to the 20th century, found in British cookbooks and also popular in colonial America. We're going to be making a hunter's pudding. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking with James Townsend and Son. A hunter's pudding is a type of plum pudding, and plum in this context means raisins. Plum puddings were often associated with special occasions, served during certain holidays or when visitors came to visit. The name hunter's pudding may be a bit deceiving. We need to be careful about assuming that it was a favorite dish for backwoodsmen. Rather, a hunter's pudding was likely a pudding that would have been reserved for various special occasions, such as a formal hunt. But that's not to say ordinary people didn't enjoy a hunter's pudding on occasion. Hunter's puddings were popular from the mid-1700s up until the beginning of the 20th century. Let's get started. We're going to be making a recipe from The Lady's Assistant, a 1775 cookbook published from Charlotte Mason's manuscripts. We're making half batches today, so if you want to make a full-size batch, all you'll need to do is double the ingredients. It will change the cooking time, so we'll talk about that as we cook it. But to start, let's look at the ingredients. I'm using a half pound of flour and a half pound of suet. Now, when I say suet, I mean kidney fat. In a previous episode, we explored the difference between suet and hard muscle fat. And when it comes to making puddings, there's a huge difference. So if you go to your butcher to ask for suet, make sure he gives you kidney fat. If you can't find kidney fat to use, or if you have neither the time nor the inclination to render it yourself, James Townsend and Son now carries Atora shredded suet. This suet is made from rendered kidney fat. It's stabilized with a little flour. Because it's rendered properly, it doesn't need refrigerated. In addition, we're using a half a pound of currants. Unlike the fleshy red berries that go by the same name and are related to the gooseberry, these currants are small, dried, seedless Corinthian grapes. Also on our pudding, we'll be using about 4 ounces of raisins. Now, raisins in the 18th century had seeds in them, so they had to be cut open and the seeds removed before they could be used in a recipe like this. There were different kinds of raisins in the 18th century. The best of the raisins were dried in the sun as opposed to dried in ovens. These were called raisins of the sun, and most of the time they were imported in jars. So they would be many times called jar raisins. The best of these raisins were called Malaga or Muscatel raisins. They were grown in Spain and imported throughout much of Europe and North America. Our modern raisins are similar in quality to a mid-level jar raisin of the 18th century while having the convenience of being seedless. Next, we're going to be adding a couple of tablespoons of candied orange peel and candied citron. Our recipe will also use about a teaspoon of nutmeg and 3 to 4 tablespoons of brandy. Now, here's something interesting about the addition of brandy to these puddings. It started to be added in the second half of the 18th century, and in many of the recipes, they find that the addition of the brandy helped in the preservation of the pudding. And many times it's noted that the puddings can be kept for up to 6 months if you keep the pudding still wrapped in its pudding cloth and kept up out of reach. This allowed cooks to make multiple puddings at once, serving one immediately and the others later on. Finally, back to our recipe, we'll need 4 eggs and 1 cup of cream. Now that's it for the ingredients. Now that we've gathered them up, let's put this pudding together. Preparing this pudding is going to be very easy. We're just going to add all of our dry ingredients plus our sweetmeats. And don't forget to add the nutmeg. That's mixed quite well. Okay, Now that our dry ingredients are done, let's move on to our wet ingredients. Let's whisk our eggs together. And then we're going to add in our cream and our last wet ingredient, our brandy. Now let's add this to our dry ingredients. Should make a pretty thick paste. Now when you're going to boil a pudding, there are a few things you have to have ready to go. You need a couple of pots of water boiling. Our large one will be for boiling the pudding itself. The smaller pot we'll use to refill the water as the water boils away. You'll also need a clean piece of cloth, one for each of the puddings you're going to boil. Linen makes a really good pudding cloth. The water makes the fibers swell up and the weave even tighter. You can also use cotton Osnaburg. Go ahead and scald these cloths. You'll also need a stout cord to tie the cloth off with. Remove the cloths from the boiling water and dust each with a little flour. Then set each one aside, flour side up, into a bowl. Gather your pudding dough and place it on top of the cloth. Tie the bag tightly around the dough. Now it's time to put this in the boiling water. Boil it for 3 hours. You want to make sure to only replenish this water with boiling water. You want this water to not stop boiling at any time because that'll increase your cooking times. Now, like I said, this is a half-size pudding. If you're going to be doing a full-size pudding, you'll want to boil this for 4 hours. Okay, the Hunter's pudding has boiled 3 hours. You'll need a bucket of cold water on hand. By dipping the hot pudding in the cold water for a few seconds, it will make it easier to get the cloth off without damaging the surface of your pudding. If you don't want to spend 4 or 5 hours boiling a pudding at your next event, you can cook these ahead of time. You can cook these the week before. If you leave them in their pudding cloth, then you can take them to the event. When you're ready to use them, you can either boil them for an hour right before you need them, or you can slice them cold and then either fry them or broil them. These puddings were usually served with a sauce, and the sauce we're using here is the most common type, which is equal parts of butter, sugar, and sack. Let's give these a try. And they're very dense and rich kind of food here. These are chock full of raisins, and they're nice and sweet. In fact, compared to today's palate, 18th century folks were not used to such sweet things, so it's likely that this would be the sweetest thing they would eat all year long. These would make a great addition or finish to a nice period meal, and because you can fix them the week ahead of time, they're a perfect kind of thing that you can pull out of the hat and fry these up from something that's been prepared without spending the 4 hours of boiling them at the event. You should really try these. These are wonderful dishes. Very nice.